I've passed the hour, depending on what time zone you happen to you are in, everyone. So welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the first session of the second day of the 2023 North American Virtual Reference Conference. I am Sandy McCarthy, a co-administrator with the Michigan Virtual Reference Service Collaborative. I'm also a librarian at Washtenaw Community College in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I will be your moderator, also with Leah Dodd, from Co-Director of Research Services from Cornell, and she will also moderate the chat. Chat is enabled, so you can add comments in the chat box. Your video and audio have been turned off, and I'll rephrase my next statement, which is you can add into the Q&A, but you can add actually in chat. We will manage both from going there. So as the session goes on, the session will be recorded, or is being recorded, and it will be available on the conference site. Give us at least 2 weeks, I'm guessing 3 weeks from there. So our presentation this morning is Miscommunication in Library Chat, how conversation analysis can help you understand and fix problems, with Suzanne Bernstein from Lansing Community College in Michigan and Sara Memmott from Eastern Michigan University, both who are part of the same collaborative I am from, the Michigan Virtual Reference Service. So presenters, please introduce yourselves and I'll let you take it away from here.
Okay, as Sandy mentioned, the topic of our conversation today will be miscommunication in library chat, and how conversation analysis can help you understand and fix problems. My name is Suzanne Bernsten, my pronouns she, her, hers, and I work at LCC, Lansing Community College, as the Web Services Librarian.
And I am Sara Memmott, pronouns also she, her, hers, where I am the social work librarian at Eastern Michigan.
So today, our agenda, we're going to introduce conversation analysis. We're going to present to you a research article on communication problems in chat, in library chat. And then we're going to analyze some chat transcripts together and finally discuss how you could create research-based training activities like the one that we do today at your own institutions. So we wanted to start with a quick poll here to find out how familiar you are with conversation analysis. So if we could have the poll come up now.
Beth, are you able to pull up the poll for us?
It is up, and I see people.
Oh, I don't see it. So maybe, you know
When
what,
you just...
Suzanne, unshare your screen. I bet you'll see it. Is it popping up for us? I don't see it, but if people
don't see it, okay, let's launch.
But
maybe people are.
Oh, someone says it. You know, it's okay. We could.
Yeah. It is up, and I can. Let's see.
Oh, it says to click on the poll at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yep, I see it also. Thank you for that suggestion, everyone. You can click the poll at the bottom, and I think we can see the results at least. Yeah.
Okay. It says that most people, there's two people who are very familiar, some that are somewhat familiar, and most people are not familiar at all. So great, thank you. I guess I can share those results. Can you guys see those now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just wanted to see at the beginning, you know, what familiarity you had again. Sara, would you mind putting the presentation back up? Thank you. Okay. So what is conversation analysis? It originated as a branch of sociology developed by Harvey Sachs, Emanuel Shegloff, and Gail Jefferson, and it offers a research methodology that involves recording and analyzing naturally occurring everyday conversation and other forms of talk. Through this analysis, CA researchers have found that although on the surface, conversation may appear to be random, in fact, it's quite orderly. So they look at things like openings and closings and turn taking and overlap and things like repair, what to do if problems occur in understanding. I just wanted to start to say I am not an expert on conversation analysis, but I did write a thesis for a master's degree in teaching ESL, where I used what we know about conversation from CA to analyze dialogues in ESL textbooks. Not surprisingly, the dialogues in the textbooks are very different than actual conversation, and there are simple ways they could be improved by incorporating insights from CA. So when I became a librarian, I always thought it would be interesting to use CA to analyze library chat transcripts. And I looked to see what research had already been done, and I found about 5 studies that were using CA to analyze library chat, and I'll share that list with you at the end of the presentation. But I also recently participated in a training activity that Sara, my colleague at Eastern Michigan, led, and she designed the activity based on a research article. So she shared what she learned from the article, and then we looked at transcripts based on that article. So I thought, let's do that with one of these conversation analysis articles. We'll present the research, and then we'll look at some transcripts and see what we can learn from that. So the study that we chose to share today was actually conducted by Irene Koshik, who was my thesis advisor at University of Illinois, and Hiromi Okazawa. And it uses a CA framework to investigate the types of potential or actual problems in communication that occur between librarians and patrons in chat interactions at a university library. They were collected at a large academic library in the US. There were 389 chat transcripts from 1 week in October 2006 and 1 week in April 2007. They were taken both from the undergraduate and graduate libraries, so the questions could be from students, staff, faculty, or the public. Okay, so a little bit about how turn-taking works. Turn-taking works differently in chat than in spoken communication because the participant can't monitor their partner's turn in progress by listening, right? They can only find out what the person said after they type and hit send. However, I was just recognizing or thinking about yesterday how when I was chatting with a patron, you can see a notification that the other person is typing, which does give you a clue, right, that they're in the process of composing their next turn. So you do have that information. In spoken talk, adjacency helps us understand talk and interpret talk in relation to what came before, right? But chat can often be different. In an article by Schoenfeld and Galato from 2003, they looked at transcripts from German chat rooms and found that turns next to each other in chat don't necessarily belong together, right? Sometimes you have to look at multiple turns to figure out how each response goes with a prior turn. So you can see in this transcript here from the article, these chat transcripts, they begin with a timestamp, and in that first turn, there's hi. The second turn, sorry for the wait, how can I help you, is both an apology as well as an invitation. And then in the third turn, that hey is responding to hi from the first turn, and no problem is responding to the sorry for the wait. And then finally, I'm trying to access the Journal of High Ability Studies is responding to that invitation for assistance. Okay, go to the next. So the term repair in conversation and analytic literature has been used to describe practices for interrupting the ongoing course of action to deal with problems in speaking, hearing, and or understanding the talk. So in oral communication, participants locate and solve problems in understanding by initiating repair, and a similar process occurs in chat. While repair and oral communication relates to speaking and hearing, in chat it involves reading, writing, or understanding writing. Repair can be initiated by different participants in communication. So it could be by the speaker of the trouble source, and that's called self-initiated repair. And sometimes that can happen in the same turn. You start to say something, you realize there's a problem with it, and you fix it right away. Sometimes self-initiated repair can come in a subsequent turn, which is called third position repair. So it comes not that time you're speaking, but later. Other times repair is initiated by someone other than the speaker, and this is called other initiated repair. And phrases that are often used to target this trouble in others' talk are things like, huh, what do you mean, where, when? Okay, next, Sara. So in this study by Koshik and Okazawa, they analyzed transcripts to look for common communication problems. And also they looked at how these problems were repaired. And this slide lists the most common types of problems that were identified. Some problems were caused by, you could say, may have been caused by the nature of the medium of communication or the fact that it was chat, like mistyping. It's easy to have a typo, right? But they did point out that in chat, typos are often forgiven or just overlooked unless they cause some kind of confusion, just keep going on. Another thing that can happen is typing in the wrong window. I know we used to at least do chat at our reference desk, which we don't anymore. Or you might be helping two patrons at the same time and send the message to the wrong patron, or it could be that the person you're chatting with is also chatting with a friend or family member and sends the wrong message to you. So that could be cause miscommunication. Another potential cause of miscommunication is just the difficulty of giving instructions when you're not co-present, right? Similar to trying to do reference over the phone. You can't see what's on their screen, so that can cause some difficulty. The other problems that occur in chat may not be because it's chat, but they might be exacerbated by the fact that they occurred in chat. For example, ambiguous terminology, or the fact that you're communicating information from expert to novice. And those are the two problems that we are going to focus the rest of our presentation on. We're going to give you some examples from the article, and then we're going to look at some transcripts ourselves. Okay, so here, if you could type in the chat, what are some words that you think can be ambiguous or easily misunderstood in library chat based on your experience? Ooh, just give you a minute for fine. Fine sounds like you'd be fine, right? But no, it's negative. Won't load. Won't let me.
I see database a few times, sources. Oh wow, lots of good examples.
Yeah. Filter, search on which account, topic. Yeah, so many things. And some of them, yeah, sign in, login, search terms, keywords, username. In this article, they focused in on some of the ones that you've been mentioning here, and some terms that commonly are often used differently between patrons and librarians. And the article explains that one of the problems in communication related to ambiguous terminology is that they're less noticeable than things like typos or typing in a wrong window. So that can make them less easily resolved. Sometimes both participants might keep chatting without even realizing that they're actually talking about different things, right? They think they have the same meaning, but it's not. So for example, in the article, they said that often when patrons were referring to sources of information for the paper, sources was often meant that they were looking for sources for the paper, where librarians often used it to refer to a database or where the information comes from. And other words that were often confused were website and database. Patrons often use the word website to refer to any kind of website, including library databases, whereas librarians often will refer, we think they mean library subscription databases, not general websites. And I'll show you here is a transcript from the article that is an example of that. I'm just going to give you a few seconds here just to read through this first, and then I'll talk through it, but I'll give you a moment of silence here to read. Okay, so you can see here in line 1, the patron is asking for a website, but it's likely that they're looking for psych info, but at this point they use the word website. So in line 11, the librarian is trying to initiate repair and asks our website or the psychology website or the psych website. There's a typo there with R, but you know, it's OU. I think they're talking about, is it the library website or the psychology website? Student replies, the psychology website. So the librarian sends a link to the psychology department website. And then here's from the patron, no. And then finally in line 22, they hear no. And then finally in line 30, they end up directing the student to a page that has psych info on it. And at least from this, the patron says, okay, so that is probably, you know, what they were looking for. And again, I just thought it was interesting to think about this, the fact that it can be hard with this ambiguous terminology because sometimes you just don't realize that you're talking about different things, right? And being aware of this while you're doing chat might help you hopefully in the future. So, okay, I think next, Sara.
Yeah. So this quote is one of my favorite insights from the article. The librarian's job is therefore to provide both information and instruction to anonymous strangers whose level of expertise is unknown to them. And I think that really captures one of the challenges of our library chat, that in most cases, we don't know who we're chatting with or how much they already know. So differences in expertise is that other significant type of communication problem. So maybe if a few people can put in the chat, how do you determine the level of expertise of the patrons you're chatting with? What helps you figure out how skilled or knowledgeable the patron might be? Yeah, I see a lot about asking questions, their terminology, if they've already searched. Yeah, asking if they're in a particular class. They're familiar, right? That it takes some conversation often to figure out the level of expertise. They might volunteer information about their role. You might ask them, or you might infer it from what they're talking about. And this is important in order to properly target our communication so we're not confusing or in some cases insulting them. And this difference in expertise, I think most often, like, we're more expert at library research than the patron, but not always. And of course, the patron can be more expert than us on the topic that they're researching. So again, not necessarily. And we'll look at a couple of short examples. So here's a short example from the article. I'll pause for a moment to read it. And this is a case where the librarian, in lines 4 through 6, they address a common misunderstanding. They say, you actually have to select a database search before you can start searching. And the patron replies with the sign of revelation. I didn't know that. Explicitly saying, yeah, I needed that information. So this is a nice example of the librarian preventing a potential problem. They correctly targeted what they're doing for the patron's level of expertise. And we'll look at another, I see some notes about the empathy, right? Pointing out it's a common problem. I'll give you a few seconds to read this one. So here the patron starts with what they probably think is a very straightforward question. Can I access the Washington Post newspaper? The librarian does a few things, greets them, explains what they're doing. And then in their reply in line 4 says, here's the link to WP Regional Business News, mentions an index, mentions the need for institutional logins. And the patrons reply, so I don't have access to the daily paper. I think they're expressing some understanding that sounded like a no, but they're also expressing a lot of uncertainty. And I think the phrasing, the so I don't have access, is perhaps an attempt to repair the miscommunication. They're trying to get a more straightforward answer, it seems to me, to what they initially asked. So here there seems to be a mismatch from the language that the librarian was using, which didn't match the patrons, and it doesn't seem to be a resolution of if the patron understood what the librarian was sort of implicitly saying, that there doesn't seem to be direct access to the newspaper. So there's definitely a difference in expertise that isn't being resolved here. Yeah, some interesting comments about other things you could do. So now that we've looked at a couple of examples of chats with ambiguous language and some differences in expertise, we're going to do an activity that gives you an opportunity to review some other excerpts and identify communication problems and possibilities for repair. So we're going to share chat excerpts in some Google Docs. In just a minute after I explain the activity, we'll put links to those documents in the chat. And so these chats have been anonymized and slightly adapted to change identifying details. And as we read those chats, let's assume that everyone was doing their best at the time. So the focus isn't on criticizing those particular chats. Remember, we're in a different, more reflective setting now. So we're focusing on what we can learn from them and apply to future chats. So I'm going to give 2 links because there are a lot of us. So we'll divide by last name. So those with last names A through L can go to one link, and M through Z will go to the other. You can read and review the chat transcript and answer 3 short questions below the transcript in the same document. If somebody else has given an answer you agree with, you can just add your initials or a plus sign as well to simplify. And then we'll come back together and look at the reflections and see what we can learn from them. And I think we can take about probably like 6 to 8 minutes for this. We'll see how that goes. So I put the links in the chat. What questions or comments about the activity, if there's any you'd like to put in the chat? Okay, I'm going to stop the share then and see if people have gotten into the Google Docs. It looks like people have gotten into the Google Docs. So if you scroll down below the transcript, you'll find the opportunities to answer the questions. And now I'll be quiet and let you read the transcripts. Okay, why don't we take just about half a minute to finish wherever you are in looking at the transcripts, and then we'll look at each of them together and go over some of the really interesting responses we've got here. All right, so I'm going to share the screen so we can look at transcript A together. So for those who weren't on this one, the patrons so they're looking for articles and mentions, trying to find something in PsycInfo. The librarian replies in line 4, looking in PsycInfo is a good idea. Mentions a subject term, brings up DE for descriptor, and gives apparently a search instruction. The patron says, are you saying I should just type in self-talk? Librarian, try DE self-talk. And I see communication problems. Yeah, a lot about that the more explanation was needed, more of a reference interview, that try is vague, explain in more detail. It appears a patron did not understand the term, and the librarian seems to assume that they will know how to construct a search. Yeah, clarify what step is tripping them up. One thing I notice about this is the patron is speaking, apparently seemingly pretty knowledgeable about self-talk. I tried finding something in PsycInfo because I imagine it's a cognitive issue, which may have led the librarian to assume that the patron knew more about PsycInfo and advanced things like descriptors than they actually did. And what to do next. Yeah, explaining what to do, asking for clarifications, backing up and talk about terms you could type, or even suggesting start over, tell me about your project and what you're looking for. Clarify how they are stuck. I see, let me back up again. Anything else you wanted to point out, Suzanne?
Oops. I thought there was one thing interesting in the beginning. The librarian should attempt to respond to users' questions by mimicking the user's sentence structure. But that was an interesting idea. I don't know. So the user, although, I mean, they kind of composed their whole question, and then the librarian had a bunch of short things. I'm not sure what I think about that, but I thought that was an interesting idea, that kind of trying to match the communication style or tone of the person you're chatting with.
Yeah. How we apply. I will never use DE in chats. Well, I don't know. There may be a time when we want to use DE in chats. Yeah, spelling things out. Check for patron understanding more often. And it's so easy to get caught up in the action of searching that you don't take a moment to think about how the patron will perceive it, right? That you can be very excited, like, oh, I found a great descriptor. But pausing to check and asking questions to clarify would be helpful. And taking the time. Yeah, back at starting at the beginning. Have they signed into an account? Lots of great ideas in there. Okay, so let's look at the second transcript. And if there's ideas coming up in the chat that I'm missing, let me know. So in this chat transcript, the patron needs to add a textbook to my course. They've got all the details. The librarian asks us to check the library catalog. And the librarian ask some clarifying questions. Were you hoping to access it? And the patron says, I already have it. They talk about posting the textbook for my course through the library. Can I post the textbook myself? Librarian asks some more questions. And the patron wants to add a textbook to their course. So there does seem to be some misunderstanding of what is the patron exactly trying to do. And I see suggestions, the patron does not have the language of the reserves and the librarian can't quite get them there. Another one, it sounds like a faculty member trying to put a textbook on reserve, but they don't know what it's called. That there is some assumption there was a student. Somebody's saying faculty member wants students to have access to their textbook directly from the learning management system. Maybe that's what's going on. Yeah, too many assumptions. Right, that there never seemed to be clarity, that there need to be more clarification in order to see what they were both talking about, using this different language of posting the book that was not clear. What might you do?
Yeah, and I was going to say, Sarah, I noticed someone highlighted that assumed it was a student, didn't ask the context of needing a textbook. Yeah, and I've noticed in some chats, people do just ask that like off the bat, right? And up front, I don't know how commonly people do that, ask a little bit more about, the status.
Mm-hmm.
Could be helpful. I was helping someone on chat and realized that partway through, they informed me they were a faculty member because yeah, I had been assuming they were a student in the way that I was chatting with them. But
yeah, asking that role clarification to help figure out. So other suggestions, yeah, asking phrases like, so sorry for missing your question. Could you tell me more? Those sound like to me like great ways of recognizing that there's been a miscommunication and trying to address it. Another suggestion of, I'm sorry for the confusion. My apologies. Thank you for your patience, right? Something to help repair what's gone on. Right, it sounds like you need course reserves. I will get contact information, right, to try to connect them to the right person. And never assuming, right, ask open-ended questions. Rephrasing is often helpful. That's a great point, just to see if you have understood. Yeah, I like that. So for me to better help you, I have a few more questions to explain why you're asking those questions. Yeah.
And interesting, I just saw a comment in the chat here. Lorraine Dallas says, I remember advice from Marie Radford reflecting on chat studies that even asking, have you checked the library catalog, can make the chat person feel like a failure if they haven't. So interesting that the person hasn't done the right thing. Interesting.
Yeah, that's I think that's a challenge of how to ask what they've done without implying you should have done this.
Yeah.
Right, because they're coming wherever they're coming from. And is there a way to say, like, are you just getting started now, or have you done some searching already? And see if that's a gentler way to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else you wanted to add about the comments? Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, I like that, Robin. It's fine if you're just getting started, but I don't want to repeat things you've already done. Yeah, that's a nice way to put it as well. Okay. So this is a pretty short and quick analysis of a couple of transcripts. You could certainly create a more full-fledged training activity by using some longer excerpts, spending more time on it at your library. And I think analyzing transcripts has become a really common chat training technique, right? That opportunity to look and reflect at these archives of what we've done. And I think that basing this analysis on some ideas from published research helps us ground that learning in some evidence, right? Using the insights of researchers like we've done here, that they've identified some common types of miscommunication. So let's focus on those. And I think that helps keep it from just focusing on like a personal preference reaction to the chat transcripts. And this could be done online like we are, or in person in small group discussions. Read articles, research article in advance, and analyze more examples and discuss them during the training session are all ways to do that. And we have a short bibliography of some other, oh, there we go. Suzanne put it in the chat, articles that use conversation analysis to analyze library chat in a Google Doc, if that is relevant. And we have just a couple of references.
And Sara, I was going to mention too, as far as when Sara did a training activity for our collaborative, she did use breakout rooms. So online, that's another nice alternative. I know it was very overwhelming. Oh, you don't see the link. Did I not include the link?
Oh, I think it went to, it might not have gone to everyone. Let me see if I can.
And Sara and Suzanne, this is fascinating. We're at about 10 minutes now.
Okay, perfect. This is the end. So yes, right, Sara? I think
yes.
We're ready for questions. Yes.
We can stop or share. And is that, Sandy, is that the link to our slides?
It's the link, the last link that Suzanne posted. I think it's the extra articles that I threw.
Okay.
And we'll add that all to the NavRock. There's I think we can add links to our description later. So.
And there's the link to our slides as well.
Well, I might have the first question for you two, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I like doing this sort of work. I struggle with prefacing it so people, librarians and chat workers, don't feel vulnerable because, you know, there's kind of something to somebody peering over your shoulder, even when you remove names and things like that. You kind of sometimes know who it is if you're in a close group. Do you have any suggestions for kind of setting the bounds before you dig into chat transcripts at your current institution?
You know, I think one thing that we've done that I thought worked really well is actually just having people just look at their own, even for them, just themselves. Like we've had everyone bring one of your recent transcripts, like we've done that, and we kind of look at the best practices. And I think that can be a good first step, because I know the last time I did an activity, I did at NavRock 2 years ago, I used my own transcript and I was like torn apart. I was very surprised, but like there were so many suggestions. So I mean, I think sometimes that can be helpful just to like analyze your own but great question. I don't know what others have what to add.
And I think, and maybe we could have done more of this, is just a reminder that I think I really do try to believe that people were doing the best they could at the moment, even if there seems like there's a glaring mistake. And that it really is about learning, like that this, as I think this study pointed out, like communication problems are inevitable. They are going to occur. It's about trying to get better at recognizing when they're in the middle of occurring, so you can repair them in the moment and not just reflect on them later. And I do, like when I use examples, I anonymize them in a couple different ways. I don't just like take out the names, like, because people use canned messages and some of those are individualized. So I tweak things a little bit that doesn't affect the content really, so that it's just to be like, it is less identifiable, or use my own, or use ones from people who have specifically volunteered who don't care, right? They're like happy. So I would be happy to see, right? There's other suggestions. Ken Messon's only use chance answered by the co-op librarians, right? If you're not using, if you want to make sure that nobody in the room is looking at their own transcript, though I hope we're also generous with our co-op librarians as well. So
Right, yeah.
Yeah, you never know what was going on at the time they were doing
right.
it.
And I think also, I mean, I remember my colleague Chuck, he's our virtual reference manager. I mean, we often bring examples that are really good too, and you know, ask permission and you know, I don't know. I think the ones we picked today were kind of showing different problems, but using examples of things that went well, and you know, that can be another way to approach it too.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. Do you consider kind of external circumstances, like if somebody is juggling 3 chats at once versus 1, does that tie into your analysis at all?
Well, I think you don't know. It's hard to know after the fact, right? Sometimes the librarian will say that, like, sorry, I'm busy with other people, which, you know, may or may not be useful, but right, they don't always say that. So I just assume, like, I assume if there's some real problem, like there must have been something going on, right? They were busy, or the internet connection was slow, or there was an ice storm outside their window, or who knows what the circumstances are.
I saw a nice idea here. Someone, Emily said that she does a chat transcript of a month email showcase. Like, I really like that idea. In our Michigan Collaborative, we do a yearly best transcript competition, which is and not really competition. It's a showcase. We pick the best transcripts and we give people awards, and I think that is really nice. And I actually got more interested in chat by volunteering to be on that committee, because by reviewing all those transcripts along with the best practices, I was like, oh, I should use the person's name. I mean, I learned so many things. So so many good things, right? So again, showcasing, like, you know, good work is good as well. But
well, thank you. And Suzanne and Sara, there's a great question in the Q&A mode. How do you keep the user engaged long enough to ask questions to get the best help? Even with explaining why I ask questions, I find that after 1 or 2, most users will disconnect.
Yeah, this is a balancing act, right? I always think about it. I remember people asking that question that, yeah, I mean, if someone's at the reference desk, it's hard for them just to leave, right? But I mean, it could be also that other things are going on. Other things are going on that they need to attend to. But yeah, I guess it's trying to ask enough questions, but not going overboard on the reference interview so that they get discouraged and leave. It's hard. I don't know if others have. Yeah.
And I think if you're asking questions in order to do a good reference interview, and you're explaining why, like I'm asking what class you're in so I can best direct you to the best resources, for example. If the patron just doesn't have time for that and leaves, I mean, would it have been better to not do a reference interview and give them one off the cuff, maybe not good answer? I don't think so, right? So I think, like, I understand the impulse to imagine that the patron left because of what I did, but we don't know. We have no idea why they left, right? They could have crappy internet, their dog, their kid, their whatever. You don't know it's what you did that made them leave. So. Right.
And from the oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying, sometimes too, maybe they got enough, right? Like sometimes I think we tend to want to, oh, and there's also this resource and that resource, and maybe they got what they wanted, and yeah.
Yeah. And browser settings sometimes can take them out. This is coming from the chat. And if folks are chatting with you on a mobile device, sometimes that, I think, can create disconnect too.
Yeah, and I see there's some good suggestions in the chat about that. Oh, I see Anne says, what are some top tips for repairing? I think the top tip is to recognize that maybe something is off, right? If you are feeling like, am I understanding? Are they understanding? And then to pause and ask the open-ended question and to reconnect. And there were I saw some good suggestions in the documents about saying, sorry, did I misunderstand? to address it and try to get it back.
Well, this was just fascinating, Suzanne and Sara. Thank you so much. Those exercises in particular were really great. I want to share the feedback link with everybody. You'll probably see it after every session in this conference, but it's really important to the conference organizers if you have a moment. Thanks again. I really appreciate your time this afternoon in Michigan, morning elsewhere.
Thanks, Suzanne and Sara.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming and for participating.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.